Hey, friends and neighbors, welcome to the studio class at Low Brass U, where F is for friends who talk about music together. I am your fearless co-host, Connor, and with us today on the euphoniumatic instrument is our fearless leader, Zach.
How's everybody doing today? Had some technology problems, but we survived it. I enjoyed playing that Bordoni while listening to myself play the Bordoni from the past, because I did not realize that I had a tab open with active audio of the stream, which is not how we do business. And yet, it's how I did business.
That's all right.
So, had some fun there to deal with, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to get comments working because I updated to a new program version, and I don't know. I tested it, it worked. Now I can't figure it out. And that's just how things go sometimes with the technologies.
Right on.
And I'm going to not use this studio mode, I think. Yeah, we're not going to use that today.
Okay.
None of these things affect the actual, viewers, not really, other than it just being a less than organized stream. But anyway, ideally, we have some cool topics for you today. We got some things that are on our minds and some things that we'll also be taking questions. I'm a little bit too quiet. Oh, I know why I'm too quiet, and no one can hear you, I don't think.
Oh, no.
Could Connor be heard at all? I don't think so.
That's okay. Possibly not. Ooh, now I can hear myself.
Do you have an open tab?
I don't think so.
That is odd. We'll get rid of the room mics. This is, it's like you mess with the technology stuff that you're doing, and then it's because it's supposed to make it easier.
Right.
And then it makes it harder. So let's see. So 13, 14. No, I think that this should be fine, hopefully. Let's see here. Anyway, we'll hope that okay, so you could be heard. I'm just a little bit
Okay,
soft.
that's good.
So I think we have that figured out now. But yes, I did add something. Mystery Jeffrey, who joined us, saw this, and maybe I'll take it off, but I think it does make sense, and this is a good thing that we can start the show with, Connor. I added a thing that says you have to be subscribed at least for a minute to comment. Which I thought would just maybe be helpful with having maybe some potentially bad actors.
Sure.
I thought that might be something that we could maybe consider. So I don't know. It's just an idea, and maybe it's gonna eventually just make it where fewer people can comment, and it's not enjoyable. I could turn it off. I might even be able to turn it off midstream. But I thought that would be a good idea. What are your thoughts on a setup like that?
I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's fine. Smash that subscribe-roni and cheese.
Right. I mean, my idea was that it encouraged individuals to subscribe, but my fear is that it encourages or discourages people from commenting, which is not necessarily what I wanted.
Sure. It is a logistical hurdle now to jump over.
Right. So, but I had it initially as 5 minutes, but I changed it to 1 minute. So, I don't know. I feel like that's pretty reasonable. Because like even if you are a troll and you just want to, have some comments in there, you just have to wait a minute, and then theoretically you can still, do whatever you want.
Right.
So we'll see if maybe that's a a terrible thing. I used to be a non-subscriber just generally on the platform, but I have changed my ways, and now anybody who gives me something on YouTube gets that subscribed. So if I learn something from your video, if I got something out of it, I go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That's where I'm at these days, which I would obviously, as a YouTube person, I would hope that other people are in that sort of thinking, but I understand if not everyone is. So one other thing, we kind of talked about last week of having some kind of more organized segments that theoretically I can make some video transitions and things. I was thinking that maybe we could do like some sort of instrument, like maybe not a tier list thing, but like an introductory to different instruments or something, like specific models.
I think that's a great idea.
Like pick one model, like let's say King 3B, and just like talk about its significance or who plays it or why you would want to play it. If you'd want to play it, maybe you don't want to play it. Eli asks, can you talk about how you balance gigs, school, and family life? That's a great question. Sorry I can't put it up on the screen. Theoretically, I should be able to, but I can't figure it out. So, but Eli, it's a great question. Once I figure out the answer to that question, I'll let you know.
Right. We're also going to looking for that one.
Right. That's the key thing. I think for me in school, I don't know how you felt, Connor, but for me in school, it was always just figure out a way to like make money playing music or teaching music. Like the unattainable thing was making a living doing music.
Right.
And just like, don't worry about any of the details. Just get there at some point.
Right.
Somehow.
I think the thing that people tell you in college, or I'm going to take my headphones off while I'm talking so I can hear myself. Like double. It's kind of confusing.
I'll work on that.
They tell you in college a lot is, say that again, Zach?
I'll work on that.
All right. That's okay. The thing I was told a whole bunch was like, take every gig, like say yes to every single thing. And I think that's great advice, when you're 18 and you're trying to break into a scene or you're trying to get more time studying a specific craft or a type of music or something like that. But there definitely comes a point, let me see if I can put my headphones back. Okay, much better. Cool. That's better. But, the reality of the situation is that that's not a balanced life at all. And it doesn't really make sense. It's great in theory, not necessarily sustainable in practice. And it makes me think back to, I can't remember where I was. It might have been at school or something growing up. The analogy of like you have a jar and the person who's demonstrating this will have like big foil balls or something like that. There's like 2 or 3 of those really, really big items that you have to put in the jar. And those are your very important things in your life, like your family and maybe your job or something like, your kids, something like that. So school. And all the little things, you might have like another pile of beans that need to fit into the jar. And if you start with the small beans, you cannot fit the 3 gigantic balls of foil into the jar. You have to put the giant balls of foil into the jar first, and then you can fill the rest of the jar all the way to the tippity top with the beans. And that's supposed to kind of symbolize like the things that are most important to you. You have to prioritize those above all else. And then everything else is going to fill in around it. And depending on where you are in life, what stage of life you're in, what your priorities are, what your job is, what your relationship with school is, what your family life looks like, your priorities are going to be different. But if you want to have things like success in school and like a family or a life outside of playing the trombone, you definitely have to be as intentional about what that's going to look like in your life as your musical side of stuff.
Right.
And so that's something that everyone has to balance on their own.
Yeah, and I think in different times in my life, I was successful on different portions of that. Like, specifically where I know Eli is in school age-wise and, what school. I mean, you can ask some people, you can ask your band directors if I balanced those things when I was your age. And I think that their clear answer would be, music was taken care of.
Right. That was good.
They probably don't know, specifically about my family life, but they probably would have some maybe constructive criticism on my ability to do schoolwork. They had access to not only my grades in their course, but, also from other teachers and things. They knew what kind of grades I was getting. I passed. But, I mean, ultimately when I was in high school, I was practicing. That's what I was doing.
Yeah.
I did some of my homework. I did, some of that stuff was being taken care of. Probably not enough of it in retrospect, but also at some times maybe I wouldn't practice as much as if I was doing all of the calculus homework that I could have done.
Right.
Which, ultimately I didn't do all of it. That's basically the way that worked. And in college, I mean, again, I won't speak for you, Connor, but that's still, even if you're getting a music degree, you still have to balance music theory or practicing. Which one's more important?
Yeah.
And it's like, again, there's a balance to all of it, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's definitely a tricky thing to figure out. And I think everyone's a little bit different and that's just, that's leaving out the family side of things. And, family, when you're, just like siblings and stuff is one thing. It also becomes different when you have offspring or you have a significant other and those sorts of things to deal with. So it's definitely, it's definitely a good question. I wish that I had like a perfect answer because I think music is specifically kind of tricky because how do you can't just gig from 9 to 5, right? You gig when the gigs are. Sometimes I have to gig at night. Sometimes I have to gig on holidays, those sorts of things. Or I guess technically I don't have to do that, but I have to play gigs or to earn that income. So it definitely can be a little bit tricky to kind of figure out that sort of balance for sure. Mystery Jeffrey says, what have you learned about this balance over time as some of your priorities may have changed or shifted?
That's a great question.
These are the hard-hitting questions today.
We're opening up today.
Did I bring this upon us by requiring you to subscribe?
Right now, all of a sudden, it's like this connection is real. You're subscribed. Right. We're in the family now.
Which, if I had to guess, all of the people who are in the chat were already people who are subscribers. They're people that are somewhat regulars,
right?
Or arguably regulars. Other than Mystery Jeffrey has missed a lot of streams, but that's okay. We
don't have any punch cards or anything.
We do have punch cards, and Mystery Jeffries is not getting a free cookie anytime soon.
Bummer.
No, but it's all good. But yeah, I mean, I think that it does change over time. I mean, I remember thinking back to being in school, like being in like undergrad, and just being like, well, I'm just gonna practice. It's like the only thing that matters. I'm just gonna like try to get good. That was the focus. That was the really only concern. For me, during my master's, I think that I was fortunate from this balance sort of thing, just because I went to a school that maybe didn't have the most rigorous coursework as compared to other master's programs. Like your experience was vastly different in that regard. I didn't do the same master's as you did in the same location, but I know that your master's degree was not like a walk in the park academically.
Right. It was definitely like very heavy on the academic side.
And I think with, kind of having that being a part of it, it's like, well, do you get an A in jazz research, or do you like really learn this Steve Davis solo or really learn the chord changes to this tune?
Yes. There was lots of times in school where, that relationship changed, and it was like, well, at the end of the day, like maybe my value is I came here to play the trombone, but at the end of the day, like I've been shown like the value of this coursework, and also at the end of the day, like if I fail out of these classes and lose my assistantship, all that trombone playing that I want to do, it's not going to be happening anymore. And so that definitely was like an immediate like priority based change, but it also kind of had me reassessing what you said before, the whole like I just want to get good. And I think that is a really, really good mentality to have, like right when you get into music school, because you're never going to have the time to practice like you did your freshman year of undergrad.
Yeah, it's not going to get easier if that's
right.
In all what someone's thinking is that it's going to be you're going to have more time to practice.
Right. There's not going to come like a weird chapter into your life like after college where you're like all of a sudden like, wow, I have just as much time to practice as when I was 18, unless of course like things happen like they did 2 years ago, but we won't talk
Right.
about
Yeah,
that.
I mean,
Was a weird
it's
little
not
stretch.
impossible. We'll say that.
Right. It's astronomically unlikely.
Right.
And either way, not completely sustainable, but for a time, that like level of like, I would even call that like, like apprenticeship or discipleship, like commitment to like, I'm just going to dig the ditch, do my fundamentals and like spend that time with the horn. That's a perfectly normal and great way to enter the world of music. I would say somewhere between grad school, getting out of school and now, the types of things that I try to include in my life musically are a lot different. I'm not as interested in like keeping my lights on specifically with making the sound on my trombone as I am concerned about the types of people that I'm surrounding myself with. And notice I didn't say musicians. Like, of course, like their ability is very important to me, but it's also like once you're living and you're out of school, it's like the people that you're spending your time with and the gigs that you're taking are informing like the people that are going to be surrounding you during your working life. And you have to be thinking like, how do I want that to look,
Right.
And so that's something to think about,
Yeah.
find people you care about and find projects that you're passionate about that get you fired up, that are, artistically impactful or, whatever your values are.
Right.
And that's important.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think take advantage as much as you can of the times where financially you're a little bit, better off. Meaning like if you're in high school, everyone's experience is a little bit different, but you have a greater likelihood of probably not having like a mortgage, let's say, or rent to pay or a car note or something along those lines. You probably have a little bit more, financial freedom as far as that goes. Maybe don't have as much income, but you don't necessarily, the rubber hasn't met the road as far as that sort of stuff is concerned for most people. I know everyone's experience is different, and undergrad can be different too, or college in general. There are people who are financially taken care of and don't have to deal with that stuff ever. There are plenty of artists from various walks of music that I can think of that have never had to be concerned with making money doing their art, regardless of being in school or being out of school. I mean, we have mutual friends that's the case, or, acquaintances and things like that. It's sometimes how it goes. And that's anytime you have that sort of setup, I think that's the time to really go after things. However long that stretch may last, maybe it's forever. Maybe it's never, and not to say you need that time or need that sort of setup to be successful. But it definitely doesn't hurt. And I think that it's easy to squander is that sort of time. And just time in general. I mean, ultimately, that's what it really comes down to, is being concerned with how much time you have to deal with all of this. You need practice time. And you have to figure out what's important, what's not important, where you're wasting your time. Time management is so much more complicated than just balancing these three things. It's like, how many hours of video games do you play? How many seasons of whatever show on Netflix do you watch a week, or something? It's like all of that sort of stuff. It's like, not saying you shouldn't have balance out, you should have some restful time. But I think we all are wasting time, sometimes. And
that could sitting around watching low brass streams on YouTube every week.
Right. Well, theoretically, this is better than practicing, right?
This is double experience points.
Right. So no, but I mean, but it is, it is of some value to talk about that sort of stuff. It's like, they're always. I mean, I watch probably more YouTube than I should. Technology videos of things that I'm never going to buy or never going to need, but I watch them. So. So I think that's something to definitely kind of be thinking about. But yeah, it's ultimately it's hard because it doesn't operate under the same normal hours, especially when you're talking about, strictly speaking, gigging. That's the hardest thing. Like if it's just music careers in general, it's not necessarily crazy hours of the night. But gigging,
like performance-based income, it's going to be a lot of nights and weekends.
Right. If you're performing, generally speaking, you're performing at a time where normal people aren't working.
Mm-hmm. Right. Someone, I mean, if you want advice on how to balance like work-life balance with someone who has a similar schedule, if you know anybody who works in real estate, they typically have to do things in an opposite schedule to someone who's a 9 to 5 worker, because most of their clientele wants to meet after work
Right.
and on weekends. And so people who are successful in that business have to have certain conversations with the people in their life. You know, if they have a significant other, they likely have some sort of channels in place for how they're going to interact. So I'm not a realtor, but there was a time up until very, very recently where I was teaching during school hours. So I was occupado from like 7 a.m. until 3 or 4. And then my partner was teaching piano lessons and really just completely freelancing. And so they would usually be leaving the house like 30 minutes before I got home. They would leave at like 2:30 and drive up to the northern Chicago burbs and go teach piano lessons all around there until 9 o'clock at night. And so if we wanted to see each other, like even like just to be around, I had to make sure I didn't fall asleep on the couch before 9 p.m., which did happen a lot my first year of full-time teaching. I'm ashamed to admit, but I was sleepy. It's hard stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's not uncommon
yes.
for me to get home at 11 midnight, 1 a.m., sometimes 2 a.m., sometimes even much later than that. You know, it's like I probably at least once a month on average, I have a gig that's out of town, and a lot of times we are taking a bus or something, and that means that, you know, if I'm going to Houston or something like that, then I end up getting back at like 5 a.m. on a like Sunday morning, you know.
Right.
And maybe I slept on the bus. Maybe now it's time for me to sleep because it's a bus and maybe it's comfortable, maybe it's not. So, you know, you get into these situations where, you know, there have been more than a few nights where I'm showing up to the house when my partner is waking up.
Right.
And that's, you know,
that's no fun.
That's not perfectly conducive to things. I mean, there's definitely an understanding that this is how it works, and it's not like it doesn't have merit or anything. It's not like I'm doing this for no reason.
Right.
But you know, it is definitely difficult to balance those sorts of things.
Yes. It's one of those things that you just have to, you're talking about how do we balance these things with this type of stuff. It just means that there's some extra communication that needs to be involved in the other parts of your life. If music, particularly performing, is going to be a big part of your life, then you just have to develop good systems to engage with the things around you and the people around you that are important to you.
Right.
And so if you have those, then there you go. Then it's all good.
Yeah. So maybe let's pivot a little bit here.
Sure thing.
Right before we got those couple questions, we were talking about doing some sort of equipment talk sort of thing.
Oh, that's right.
And yeah, it was a very, very good questions. That's why we talked about it for 15, 20 minutes. But yeah, I think that's, you know, the equipment idea, you know, and maybe that could be also not just like thinking about it as being a specific instrument, but a type of instrument, a type of design or something. Thinking about, like, you know, we could talk about just like the alto trombone or something like that. Thinking about those sorts of things. I think what I'd like to do is in Discord, if you're in Discord, which, you know, it'd be great if you wanted to be in our Discord. I think I might do some poll things there to kind of get some ideas. I've got a crying dog in the other room. Hopefully that's not heard, but if it is, sorry. But yeah, I think that doing some equipment related things. We did a theory topic last week, which I think was good. I think maybe a theory topic that we could talk about this week. Zach says York tubas.
Ooh,
that's
York
a
tubas.
good. I probably have to do a little bit more research to talk about it. We could talk about it a little bit. Connor, do you know what that refers to? Does that mean anything to you?
I was thinking like peppermint patties.
Yeah, so it's a combination of chocolate and mint. That's pretty key, and it really opens up the low register.
Can I say something completely unrelated?
No. Yeah.
All right. So I know that Zach also is an enjoyer of banana and ice cream, and That's like essentially what it is. You just make ice cream. It's not real ice cream. You just blend up bananas and eat it, usually like peanut butter or something. I went on a website that was like really fancy that had all these extra flavors, and I made mint chocolate chip banana ice cream, thinking it would taste like mint chocolate chip banana ice cream. But the thing that you forget is that no matter how much it looks like ice cream, it still kind of tastes like bananas. And so now you're eating bananas with mint extract, and you just feel really silly.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't sound good to me. I'll admit it. Yeah, I think part of that is certain things cover up or enhance or balance certain flavors. Certain things do not.
Mint just brings out the banana-ness of a banana. It really makes it shine.
Yeah, that doesn't sound. I'm also not a huge mint person as it is.
Fair.
Fair. So, like, I don't even use mint toothpaste. So,
wow.
No, I mean,
thought I knew you.
I don't use mint toothpaste, but I wouldn't say it's like I'm specifically avoiding it.
Are you a bubblegum guy?
I don't. I think it's just like no flavor. I think is what. I think
they don't make that.
They do make that.
That's not real.
Yeah, I mean, I've gone so far as for a while I was making my own toothpaste, and it was like actually pretty flavorless. It's like
wow.
But anyway, so York tubas. What are those? So York. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, maybe we should probably have a soundboard at some point. I've definitely been thinking about that. I think the problem with that is it would just be our inside jokes of like Vine humor from a very narrow window, because
you start there, and then it becomes the humor of the collective, and we'll pick up some things as we go to add to the soundboard, and it'll grow with us.
On that note, before we get into the York tubas, which we are going to get into, Zach, I promise. I always have these ideas where, like for TikTok videos, which if you're not following Low Brass U on TikTok, I mean, what are you really doing? But I have these like TikTok ideas based off of current trends, and then I'm like, no, that's tacky. I don't want to do it. And then I don't do it. And then I like regret it because the trend happens, which is probably how this is going to ultimately go. But here's my TikTok idea. Are you hip to the bag alert, major bag alert sound?
I'm aware of it. Yeah, it's been coming up on my feed.
So, I mean, probably some people know that that TikTok trend if you're on TikTok. But what I was thinking about doing was making it a reference to the Bridge of Cherokee. And it's like when they ask like what the tonicization, of the bridge, because it's it's a 251 in B, a 251 in A, a 251 in G, also known as bag. Major bag alert.
It's a major bag alert.
But it would probably flop, and I'm probably not going to do it. So that's where the idea is going to die. So someone can steal that idea. I give
someone else use that.
As long as you're following Low Brass U on TikTok, you're allowed to steal that idea. I'll put that caveat on there. Those are the only stipulations. Back to York tubas, where we actually were talking about.
York tubas.
Do you know anything about the York brand, Connor? Have you heard of that?
We've been over this. It's confections, chocolate-covered treats. Beyond that, I've heard it before. Like I'm on the threads. I'm on Tuba Euphonium. I'm on I'm in the Facebook groups.
Yeah.
So I've seen those words before. So maybe even a horn being sold or two, but I don't know what it means to be a York tuba. Is it a design of tuba? Is it a
what
brand?
Most people are referring to when they talk about York tubas is York style tubas.
Okay.
And being that they're coming from the design of a 6/4 B flat tuba that was cut down to C.
Oh.
So like the Arnold Jacobs CSO York tuba. Which there used to be two, now there is one, because one was destroyed in an elevator shaft with a harp. A little bit of an incident. But yes, so essentially it comes from this, this kind of specific design that stems from a tuba that was cut down from B flat to C, which is really how we got these gargantuan C tubas that we play today, like in like the 50s, I want to say.
How do they cut them? Where do they cut the tuba?
That's a little bit above my pay grade to know exactly where it is. I mean, you have to cut it multiple places. So,
Okay.
Do you know how long a B flat tuba is versus a C tuba?
You've told me before, but I don't
So
remember.
a B flat tuba is roughly 18 feet. A C tuba is roughly 16 feet.
Okay.
So you need to cut out 2 feet of the actual tubing of like the main body of the instrument.
I see. And that comes from a couple of different places.
Yeah, and it probably depends on the design, and there's a whole art to that. It's not a thing that's done as much anymore. For a while, that was just like how we got the instruments that, the top tier professionals were playing them. No one was really making 6/4 C tubas. C tubas weren't really an American thing at that point in time. They weren't really much of a thing in general.
Interesting.
So what they do is they'd find 2 feet to cut out, take this branch down a little bit, do this spot. One feature that would probably always happen is that the lead pipe would be shorter, so it would kind of be rotated around, and so those instruments are a little bit awkward to hold. But essentially, the York style is a cut down. I mean, now they just make them normally, right?
Right.
But it's from that design. That CSO York was copied by a bunch of companies. That was kind of like it. At first, it was like 1 or 2 people made copies of it, and they took that instrument, took a bunch of measurements. Now there are several, and it's kind of just a design at this point that various companies are making tweaks to. But you can buy a York-style 6/4 C tuba from, I would say, most mainstream most manufacturers at this point. Like, you may have heard of the Yama York. Have you heard of the Yamaha York style C tuba? The 826, I believe, is the number. It's not hard to find. It's the most it's a little bit hard to find, just that you're not going to see it in the wild. But if you search Yama York, you'll be able to find it, although that's not its official name because of copyright infringement, and also that's just like not how Yamaha names things. But that's the most expensive tuba that like commercially is available, which saying it's commercially available implies that you could just get it if you wanted it, which is not really true. They don't make a ton of them, and they don't make them for anybody either. At least they historically haven't. But it costs, I think, $39,000 is the current going rate. Not an insignificant amount of money. A nice car, I'd say. That's the most expensive one, but there are several different manufacturers that make them. I mean, Eastman has one, Wessex has one. A really common one that among orchestral professionals is the Walter Nerschel York style C tuba. And then, it's at some level, it's where exactly the line of what a York style is maybe a little bit fuzzy, because it's like, is it every 6/4 C tuba that's piston? Probably not, but like my 6/4 C tuba is definitely not a York style, because like I would say by the definition it has to be piston. But even the piston version of my horn is not really a York style. But essentially it's that style of tuba, I would say, is the main instrument that you hear in top tier symphony orchestras in the United States. Like I said, that's the main tuba that someone would use. Whoever makes it, whatever brand, whatever kind of alterations that may have been done to it from that initial design.
And that's current, like today, like modern day.
Yeah, I would say it probably wasn't. It's only gone up over time for the most part.
I see.
Not everyone plays one, I guess, but it's pretty rare for someone in a major symphony orchestra to play something else.
Interesting.
Like it does happen. There are some rotor players, but usually pretty much everyone's playing a 6/4 tuba. If you're not in a super large orchestra, it's not like it's necessary. It's arguably never probably necessary to play a 6/4 tuba. But a PT6 is, 5/4 tuba. There definitely are people who play that in large orchestras. I think that's what Carol Yanch in the Philadelphia Orchestra played for a long time. But you know what she doesn't play anymore?
Oh.
That. So she plays. She's had a couple of York style C tubas that she's played since then. I think now she plays a Yama York, I believe. So it's pretty common to play a York style C tuba. If I were to get another 6/4 C tuba, it would probably be a York style. And I'd say that being silver plated is definitely a part of it too.
I see.
But that's not 100% necessary.
Okay. I'm looking at pictures of York style C tubas, and I immediately recognize the overall kind of gist of the...
Yeah, it's probably just what you see if you think in your mind, if you think orchestral tuba player, big tuba.
Yes. I think I've sat in the few orchestras that I have sat and played in. That's what the tubas looked like.
Right. And that's what everybody, that's the big shiny toy that everybody wants. You don't have to play that. I don't play it. There are days where I wish I did. There's days that I'm glad that I don't. But that's probably what's the most in vogue instrument. And I don't think that that's going to change super soon. But I definitely would say that not everybody needs a 6/4. You don't need a 6/4 tuba to play in your community orchestra. Those sorts of styles of tubas are meant to be played with very large groups. But yeah, so we're BNS Neptunes in the same vein as Alexander tubas. Yeah, that's my understanding, is that it's kind of after an Alexander design. But that's I get a little bit fuzzy with that sort of stuff. I'm not as knowledgeable about Alexander tubas as I like to, which I think also would be kind of a cool idea of having these sort of specific targets for instrument manufacturers or instrument specific model or something, because we would ultimately learn some things if we had the time to do some research outside of this, which is maybe a little bit hopeful. But Zach says, I never actually knew about tuba cutting. Yeah, it's not something that happens very much today. There are, Bob Rusk is one of the people who is known for cutting tubas, and I would say that people still do it to some extent, but I think most of the tubas that you would want to cut have been cut. And the Holton, what is it, the 345? That's another one that would be cut a lot. That's nowadays you can get the tuba that you want made, which is probably better ultimately. There definitely is the stigma behind the CSO York, and I've never played it, but a lot of the tubas that I've played that are cut, I wouldn't describe them as being this is what I need. I think building it with that design in mind, but building it from scratch is probably ultimately better. So also, is your 6/4 Neptune somewhat equivalent to the PT7? It's definitely still different than a PT7, but I know that was a somewhat close instrument, which ultimately neither of them are kind of commercially available anymore. Roger Bobo did an LA with a 186 a long while, and he was legendary. Talking about cutting tubas. Yeah, I mean, Roger Bobo had a lot of weird instruments, but he did have a G tuba and a D tuba, which had to be cut. I mean, as we've mentioned on this show before, ultimately, any brass instrument can be made with a dream and a blowtorch. That's right. And it's all about having the length of tubing. When you cut an instrument, you do all this weird stuff, and the taper of the overall bugle, that definitely affects its intonation, and maybe it makes it better. Most likely it probably doesn't. But it could, it's going to change it, I guess, is the point. So, it's not unheard of to cut an instrument, but it can be problematic for sure. But that's how a lot of designs start. I think you could argue that a 2250 F tuba from Meinl Weston is basically just an E flat tuba cut down to F. So going from 14 feet to roughly 12 feet. So that's something that kind of, is how some designs are kind of born. We should get a GoFundMe for Connor to get an Inertial York.
I support this.
I think that there's 16,000 euros. That was a while ago. I remember Walter Inertial posted on his Facebook saying that he's raising his prices to 16,000 euros, and that was probably like 4 years ago.
That is several more euros than I have available to spend
Well,
on tubas.
well, but it's that's why it's a large GoFundMe, and it's
That's true. If we can dream it, we can be it.
I'll be.
And you can just send me to every tuba audition in the United States. I'll go. I'll bring my little tuba, and just kind of.
Well, it wouldn't be a little
it.
tuba. I think if you were paying any attention, it wouldn't be a little tuba.
It would be a big
tuba. Although there technically are York designs that are smaller, but that's not usually what people mean when they talk about York tubas. I think I'd be a little sad if we did a low brass U GoFundMe and Connor ended up with a inertial. Feels a little unfair and just a little.
Sorry, it's what the people want.
If we're gonna do a GoFundMe for Connor, I think it should be for his bass trombone fund.
If we actually raise the money for me to own inertial, I would commit and promise to only learn how to play Seven Nation Army and other pet band fixtures, but just use it for like the worst possible application.
But with some sort of mic that goes not just like into the bell, but like through a branch, like get it real deep in there.
Let's throw it in like one of the pistons that I'm not going to know how to use.
Yeah,
like get it, just like thread it through there.
Well, you probably know what all the pistons do.
Well, we figured it out now, but I don't know.
Do you remember what the fifth valve does though, which is not likely to be a piston? See, that's where he put it.
The fifth valve gives you a half step above the fundamental. Is that right?
No.
What? That's what you said it did. You lied to me. It was because
it gives you that note if you press all the buttons down.
Right. Oh, but what does it do on its own? I don't remember. Oh, I remember. It was a different length of first valve, right?
Sort of. Right. It's that low, if you're thinking of B flat instrument, it's the low E flat that is problematic 1-4 or 1-2-4.
That's right. I remember things.
Just in the fact that people play an orchestra well, not just on a York. Yeah.
He's talking about the Bobo thing.
Oh, I see. I got it. Yeah, I would argue. Yeah, I see what we're talking about here. Bobo played in LA with a 186 for a long while. I think that this is an excellent point. I actually do want to break down that that sort of idea and push back on that idea.
Wait, what are we pushing back on?
The idea that you should just play a 186 and you'll play in the LA Phil.
I don't know. That's what I was going to do.
I mean, tubas are expensive. I'm not saying just buy whatever tuba for any reason. But I think assuming that because someone did it in 1960, that it could be done today. This is kind of like you could do this with a lot of sports like basketball, of just like, comparing eras and things. It's not you weren't always getting a tuba from Germany. That wasn't always feasible, depending on what time the world's history we're in. And also, like, not all these tubas existed. A lot of these York style instruments didn't exist. You couldn't get them. Maybe you could find one, have someone cut it, but the world was a far different place. I sincerely don't believe that Roger Bobo playing a 186 today beats modern players playing modern equipment. I think
bold claim.
Nothing against Roger Bobo,
no.
But I think that the idea is like that's not the right tool for the job now that we have better tools. But ultimately, any tool will work.
Right.
There's just the deeper you get into all of these sorts of things as time progresses, as like a tuba society, you start getting better tools to do better specific tasks. And it's still happening. Instruments are still getting better. In 50 years, they'll be right now we're more focused on making instruments at a high level cheaper. But ultimately still instruments are getting better. Zach says, I was lucky enough to try my teacher's 6-quarter inertial, other than trending a bit more flat than I really liked the sound. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that, when I kind of said playing a York style tuba, there's some days where I wish I did, there's some days I wish that I didn't. Intonation is one of those things that I'm glad I don't play one. That's a common problem, and they're all different. The Nerschels are handmade by Walter Nerschel himself. And if I got a 6-quarter C2 or 6-quarter York style tuba, that's definitely one that I would be considering. The best way to go get one would be to, when he has 10 of them in his shop, to, ideally, be able to play all of them and choose the one that plays the most in tune. Because they're all different, and because handmade instruments are just going to be different, they're going to sound better most likely. They can make certain parts of it thinner, and just a lot of things are better because it's handmade. But intonation is not necessarily worse; it's just less likely to be consistent. So Nerschel. Some of them play well in tune. Some of them. No tuba plays perfectly in tune. If you're reading a post on Facebook of someone selling a tuba and they're just like, yeah, this tuba is great, and it's just like it plays perfectly in tune, like no weird slide pulling, like I don't touch the slides at all, like everything is super easy.
Hey, why are you selling that thing?
Right. And it's like it's almost like they're trying to sell you something. Right.
Almost.
So, in a manufacturer as well, right? They're going to say that this is the case. And ultimately, each tuba, no matter what instrument you're playing, each note, you might have to change the intonation depending on the context anyway. So, no instrument is perfect.
Gesundheit.
Thank you. I think I muted the correct thing, and nobody heard that.
Oh. How do you mute in this application, if you don't mind me asking? Getting kind of behind the curtain here.
I don't know that to answer. I'd have to get you off screen to fiddle with it.
Okay.
I can mute you, at least mute you on. You should be muted now. Say something. I think that you probably weren't heard.
We'll find out eventually.
I'm using a new mixer for everything. I previously wasn't really using a mixer. I was using Pro Tools to pretend to be a mixer. So, yeah, Mark says Mystery Jeffrey. Sorry. It's this nice kill switch. I have it theoretically. I have a bunch of different mixes. One of those is going to Connor. One of those is going to me. One of those is being broadcast. And there's
all types of safety features built into this live stream. He has a button that he can press that will send a spring activated in the bottom of my chair and launch me straight out of the roof of my home if I ever say anything crass.
Yes. Mystery is solved. We're gonna keep up. I like Mystery Jeffrey. I like the idea of it being Mystery Jeffrey.
We love the idea of you, Mystery Jeffrey.
But yeah, so yes, I don't know how to mute yourself. I can mute you. I thought about doing it, but I didn't have the quick enough hand. And I tried to attach a sustain pedal that I don't use to this mixer because it has a foot switch thing. This one did not do anything. So I might have to order another one because that's the only one that I have other than the actual sustain pedal for this keyboard. I don't want to not use that. Because how can I play D minor 9? I dare you to say something crass. Yeah, we don't do that here. I think the hot take about Roger Bobo playing a 186 today is as hot of a take as I'll go. And I think, not to belabor that point, but I think the perfect example of just taking Roger Bobo as a solo player, he basically is the namesake for a design that is a really, really great tuba, that is one of the best tubas on the market, that didn't exist when he was playing in the LA Phil.
Right.
At that point in time, that's just what you played was a 186, maybe a 188. But for F tuba, he played a lot on a symphony. That was one of the reasons why I got mine, because some of my favorite Roger Bobo recordings are him playing the symphony. You go see him on the Johnny Carson show, he's playing a symphony. But the Roger Bobo model, the 8 goodness, it's not the 8, is it 821? I think that's what it is. It doesn't matter. It's the Roger Bobo model. They make three F tubas. It's the Roger Bobo one. The smaller one, but with the big bell, basically. And that's one of like the nicest F tubas I've ever played. And it's like, do you think that why did that instrument come to be if it wasn't to make a better instrument? So, not that there's anything wrong with a 186. I also want to make sure that that's clear. It's just having the right tool for the right job. Thinking, I always go back to the hammer analogy because it's the simplest. It's like, can you remove drywall with a regular size, like, framing hammer? Yes. Would you rather use a sledgehammer? Would that be faster work for it? Yes. Could you use a sledgehammer to hammer in a nail into the wall? Yes. Does that make sense? No. If all you had is a sledgehammer, that's probably what you'd use. If all you had was a framing hammer and you need to get rid of some drywall, with enough force, you could make it happen. So, the 186 is a great tuba. It's just smaller than what most people are playing. And I think you hear that not necessarily as being a negative, but like I forget exactly how to find this recording, but the recording of Planets with the LA Phil with Roger Bobo playing that everybody talks about being like ridiculous because the tuba stuff is so loud. It's like part of that is because he's playing a tuba with a smaller bell and it's more piercing. I know that's a weird way to describe the tuba, but a 6-quarter tuba is going to have a really full, balanced sort of sound to it, more felt than heard. The smaller the bell is and the smaller the bore is, the more directionality that it starts to get, the more trombone-like, even though it's very far away from trombone. Like Zach is saying, that recording is amazing. And it is amazing. It's really fun to listen to. I think it's maybe worth mentioning that playing like that can get you fired. And that's the other thing, too, of why people like playing larger instruments. I mean, we see this in the trombone world as well. I mean, we've talked about it a little bit on this show, but, for those who maybe don't know this or haven't thought about this, it's like we've talked about tenor trombone players playing bass trombone slides, right? Like in the Chicago Symphony, that's a common thing, to play like a 562 nickel slide or just, bass slide in general. And a lot of orchestral players, maybe not a lot's maybe a little bit too strong. Many orchestral players use a bass trombone slide on a tenor trombone or a dual bore slide or just overall play a larger instrument. And I think what that kind of allows you to do is to play louder without getting the hand, right? Because part of getting the hand when the conductor says, whoa, too much trombone, too much tuba, is when it's sounding crass, sounding aggressive, and not necessarily what the conductor wants, but it's really more of a frequency spectrum thing more than decibel, I think, being that it's more mids than low frequencies, less fundamental, and it hurts more, which can be a good thing. Zach's saying, I think on Planets especially, that piercing sound is maybe a little bit more appropriate than, say, some Prokofiev. I wouldn't necessarily disagree. Thinking about Gustav Holst, who wrote the Planet Suite, being a British composer, he's heard a lot of E-flat tuba. If you were to push an E-flat tuba the way that Roger Bobo pushed that 186, you would hear a similar sort of sound. Because they're kind of similar. Depends on what E-flat. I mean, this is definitely very generalized, but it's a smaller tuba than these 6-quarter inertials that we're talking about. And then saying that that's not appropriate for Prokofiev, totally agree. Prokofiev being a Russian composer and also just thinking about what his music kind of sounds like, it's a lot of B-flat tuba, and that's really what it was written for. We play it on C tuba. I'm not saying you can't play it on C tuba, but again, it's more towards that felt sort of just like expansive sort of sound. I think about the like filling a balloon sort of sound, like from the center, that sort of idea, instead of like this in your face sort of sound. I know the tuba rarely is that much in your face, but yeah, that wouldn't be appropriate on Prokofiev, because even C tuba a 6-quarter C tuba is close, but really should be played on a B flat tuba, which is something that tuba players in the United States, are starting to do more of. It's been common to play B flat in Germany and things like that. But in the United States, it's more common now to play B flat, although still not perfectly common, but for that sound aspect. Do you have any thoughts about all that, Connor? Kind of just let me go. I think you're muted on my... Why can't I hear you? Say something? Yeah, I don't think that any sound is getting to me. Did you mute yourself? Yeah, I can't hear you. No. So while you get sorted that out, I'll give you some time. I'll hear you when you come back in once you figure it out. Would small British Fs still have been in vogue during Holst's time? That's a little bit out of my knowledge base. That you might be right. That's definitely something that was somewhat common. I don't really know, but I guess my argument would just more so be that definitely not 6-quarter C tubas. I mean, it's possible some of it would have been played on B flat. And that's, somewhat speculation in things, but yeah, we maybe just have lost. Maybe it's not on Connor's end, but I definitely can't hear him. Yeah, Connor, you can still hear me, right? Yeah, nothing is coming through. It just says no audio from you on FarPlay. I think the mixer thinks Connor is muted, is going to sneeze. That's why it's muted. Yeah, I didn't mute him. This is on Connor's side. It isn't. I don't know how it happened, but it happened. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, that's one of the really interesting things that I find from the Tuba Family book by Cliff Bevan, which is a book that I always think about buying because it's no longer in print and you can find some copies, but they're so expensive. One day I'll buy it. It's a lot to spend on a book, it feels like. But anyway.
Hello.
We're back.
That was weird.
Did you figure out what happened?
No, I don't figure out what happened specifically. FarPlay just decided that my microphone didn't exist anymore. Huh. And then it said it existed. It was just like, yeah, we're not going to give you any signal.
Gotcha. Let me put you back on screen.
I've been interjecting this whole time. I was saying, I agree. I even had a point in the middle of when you were talking about Holst, and I was like, wow, Zach is just like talking over me. Like, how rude.
Yeah, I just thought you weren't talking. I thought you just like didn't have anything to say.
I suspected that I was still muted from our little joke about the kill switch earlier, but I didn't even suspect for a second that it was on my end until you said something.
Yeah, it's all good. I just like the weight of like continually talking. It's just like Connor has nothing to say.
Sorry, yeah, no, I was interjecting I had thoughts.
Do you want to share any of those thoughts?
No, I don't. I forgot them. Yeah.
Yeah. So Zach says, I think it was dominated by E flat for bass and then still now, but I'm no expert. Yeah, I mean, anyone who thinks that they're an expert probably, is just not still learning things. The more you learn about a topic, the more you know that you don't know. I'm not an expert, certainly on British tuba related things. I've kind of always had in my head that E flat would have been more common then, but small Fs were somewhat common. There were compensating F tubas that existed, and like, for example, like my understanding is that the Von Williams was written with a compensating like Besson F in mind. So, but yeah, that's something that I know some about. But the Cliff Bevan book, to kind of go back to that, it's an interesting book because there's one page on there. That's kind of like a timeline with various countries, and it kind of shows what tubas were being used or what tuba-like instruments were being used in what countries, kind of based off of timeline.
That's pretty cool.
So, like in France, what might have been used?
What tubas were being used in France?
Like Beadlo. What tuba was that written for?
Oh, I don't know. Was it an F tuba? Did they play F tubas in France? Did they play?
They played French C tubas or sax horn sort of
tubas.
things. So they played, but the French C tuba was an octave above our current C tuba. It's
So it's a euphonium.
basically look up
It's
a
C
French C
euphonium.
tuba. Yeah, Zach had it, and I know there's a time delay, but I know that you typed that based off of the time delay. I know you typed it before I gave the answer. Right, French. See, come on, Connor. Literally everyone seems to know. No, I'm not trying to actually shame you, because there probably are people who didn't know that, because it's why would you know that? But yeah, essentially that's part of it. And then thinking about Italian, yeah, you're just getting everyone's got it.
I'm getting obliterated today.
Yeah, they're weird instruments, but yeah. So when you play beadlo, it's like, oh, there's a high G sharp. There's that note. That's odd. Why would we have that?
That's
And
really
it's like,
high.
well, because it's not that high for an instrument that's an octave above, right?
Right.
And before that, instruments like the ophicleide or the awfulclyde and the serpent were used, like when Berlioz wrote Symphonie Fantastique. It was before the tuba was patented. It was 1824, I think, and the tuba was patented in 1835.
Huh.
So those instruments were being used. The cimbasso was being used in Italy, for certain points in time. And we see these sorts of things translate into trombone land as well. Thinking about, like, why are all the Italian trombone excerpts so technically challenging?
Oh, because of pistons.
Right. Well,
Or would they have been rotors? Okay. I see
They'd
that's
actually
why.
be. I think that they were technically slightly different than rotor. They were of the rotor variety, but I think they were like a weird kind of valve. But you're on the right track. It's like they were valves, not slides.
Right.
So when you're playing William Tell, or when you're playing, any of those excerpts that
Horrible.
were also afraid of on the slide, it wasn't meant to be played on the slide. We have to do
Right.
it now because someone said it was possible, but
Why did they say that?
I don't know. And then thinking about keys of tubas, kind of zooming in, once the tuba was a mainstay, in Germany, B flat and F were the main tubas for a long time, still are for the most part. Some professionals play C, but it's still not really that common overall. And so you have things that really show off the F tuba stuff. And then you also have things that are just in the basement because they're meant to be B flat tuba. Russian music, typically B flat tuba, nothing else. And it's an interesting kind of thing to think about. Had a few comments in here. We got lost because everybody was showing that they knew about the French C tuba when you knew nothing about it. Let me sift through these. Hall's been writing for bass drone in G, resulting in the pedal tone B flats and second trombone. Yeah, there's some really interesting stuff like that too, with bass trombone and weird keys or things like that, or just weird instruments like Berlioz again, Symphonie Fantastique, those pedal B flats just like ripping away in the bass trombone part. Shift in topic. What are your most influential academic experiences that weren't particularly music classes that affected you strongly as a musician? You got that one, Connor?
That's a tricky question. Trying to think of cool classes that weren't particularly music classes. This one's kind of a in between one. I was lucky enough to have an acoustics class available to me in my undergrad, and that got me really, really interested in the science of sound production, and it got me curious, and I started bringing in a lot of I didn't think of them as physics related or acoustics related questions, but brought those things to my trombone professor, and that informed a couple of years of my undergrad lessons where all of we were thinking about sound in terms of hertz and things like that, and it was really, really fun to dig into how the trombone goes.
Yeah.
I still don't really know, but that was a cool semester. Other one, I had a really great history professor that my freshman year of undergrad really helped me through getting my chops together as far as academic writing in the liberal arts and being able to think critically and argue for a point using argument language. And that helped me through a lot of my music history courses, and then saved me through pretty much all of my graduate coursework where it was a lot of critical thinking and academic writing in that sort of sense. And having those skills already helped me to go deeper into that coursework or increase the rigor of my, self-directed learning, so that I got a lot more out of my master's degree than I would have had I just been spinning my wheels figuring out how to write my first few times sitting in a graduate level course.
Yeah, I'll just leave your answer as the answer for that one.
I
was more focused on my music classes always. Let's see. The way that Berlioz writes is amazing. You get adrenaline rush every time you play Berlioz. I mean,
oh yeah,
no disagreement there. I think there were some interesting videos on YouTube of this guy playing Beadlo and Promenade from the French C and six quarter and F for Beadlo. Channel's Tuba Man, I think. Do you know who Tuba Man spelled that way is? You know this person.
Have we talked to Tuba Man before together? On the show?
I think you're thinking about someone who's also Tuba Man, but not with that spelling. You're thinking about Tuba Man 365.
That's
who
what
has
I'm
been missing
of.
from these streams, but I'll let it slide.
Yes. No, I can't think
there
of
are no punch cards, right?
Tuba
That's
Man.
Carl Kleinstuber.
Oh, that's Carl.
Yeah, so Carl Kleinstuber, what Zach is talking about is essentially some clips from his lecture recital for his dissertation for his doctorate at UNT. I was not there. That was while I was already... That was like at the end of my master's, I think. I'm not exactly sure when that was, but I wasn't... It's in that weird area where I was not a UNT student in my adult life.
So I was there then.
You were there at that time.
I have to say, interrupting this story, one of my single most embarrassing stories about conversational faux pas happened with Carl when I was talking to him one time. And I think about it's one of those things that I wake up thinking about it at 3 a.m. sometimes. It's one of those embarrassing stories. I'll say it really quick. It's a funny story. I laugh about it now. I was subbing in the 7 o'clock lab band, one of the big bands at UNT. It was directed by JT at the time, Joachim Tofgard, one of our other low brass friends. And Carl was subbing and playing bass trombone in there at the time. And I was still just a little snot that had just shown up to school. So no one knew who I was. And I was still meeting people. I had no idea who Carl was at the time. I didn't know about his incredible career, his amazing playing. And I sat down, played 3 notes, and JT cuts us off, starts talking to the saxophones about something. And I had been sniffling and hacking away because I clearly was probably too sick to be at that rehearsal. That was it was a different
time where you just wanted to be considered reliable.
Yeah, you didn't prioritize your health, and that was foolish.
Right.
And anyways, he leans over to me and he goes, "You sound sick, man." And I said, "Thanks, I've been practicing a lot."
I think you told me that, but I think I've forgotten.
Oh no! And he's like, "No, you actually sound ill. You shouldn't be here." I felt horrible. Oh my gosh,
that's fantastic. That was definitely worth the interruption.
Yeah, so I just went home and drank some water and went to bed at 8 o'clock and just thought about my life and my priorities.
That's pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
But to go back to that video, I think there are a few videos. I mean, he definitely has some different French C tuba videos. But yeah, he wrote his dissertation. I can't remember exactly what the title was, but it was basically talking about the French C tuba. It was in a nutshell. And a lot of it was in the lecture was demonstrating different things from pictures at an exhibition, which I think what he was trying to show while he was playing not just Beadlo, but also some of the other portions where we think about it now being this really big broad tuba sound, but that's not actually what it was. Which I think that kind of parlays into a nice topic, and this will be our last topic before we do what I think is our new outro of if you have a horn handy. Do you have a horn handy?
I can grab a horn.
Grab a horn while I'm finishing this up.
Right.
But yeah, so thinking about would these composers have wanted to use these modern instruments? Would they like these sounds, these instruments that they didn't have access to at that time? That's a really common kind of discussion. I think about it a lot with Berlioz in Symphony Fantastique, where we play the Dies Irae, and should we hide behind the bassoons because the ophicleide and serpent would have been more of a reedy sort of sound, or should we be in the forefront because it says fortissimo? And some people think that, of course, it says fortissimo, you should play fortissimo, and some conductors want that, some don't. Ultimately, that's who gets to make the decision. But I think it's an interesting idea of thinking about, well, is it necessarily that these instruments, one sounds better? Does the C tuba sound better than the French C tuba, being an octave different on some of the things? Bead low, probably better, but it could be played on a large 6/4 C tuba. And the promenade and all that sort of stuff. That link didn't come through. I'm not sure. Maybe there's some sort of permissions thing of the link not being helpful. Sorry about that. But you can find it if you search for Tuba Man with that spelling. And another kind of thing to think about with, or one thing that Ryan said, strange fingerings with the French C tuba. And I know that Carl had his French C tuba altered to kind of deal with that. So I can't remember. He made it a more modern setup, although it'll never be fully modern. Cool. So let me pop on a little fancy thing here. I was thinking about this, and I think in the future, if we were thorough enough, we could maybe agree on a chord progression ahead of time.
Oh, yeah.
And then, you could land on a note that is good with the new chord, and we could do something along those lines. It takes away a little bit of the fully improvisational sort of idea, or free, I guess I should say.
Right.
I'm not a good enough pianist to hear what note you're playing and easily switch to that note.
Right. That's a tricky thing. So we'll try to just follow each other.
Right. So if I change chords and it sounds bad, sorry.
That's okay. We'll figure something out
do you
together.
Want to play a few notes? I suspect that you might be too hot.
Right. I also have a mute in
okay.
as well, so that might help us a little bit. It's a new mute that I just got, actually, courtesy of our friends at Dennis Wick.
Oh, did you need that for something? Did you specifically ask about it?
I asked about it. Yeah, I'm using it for a musical coming up in a couple of months, and I also just really wanted to try out their what do they call it, the wah? Or I think
they call it the wah-wah mute, the bubble mute.
Right.
We can call it a Harmon Mute.
Okay. All right.
Although that's, it's I can't remember what that idea is called, but it's it's like calling a tissue a Kleenex.
Right.
Connor.
Sorry, I know I'm bonk.
You're getting muted for the time being. You've had one too many pops for today. So you will get your privileges back when you've settled your things. But yeah, so a Harmon Mute Harmon is technically a brand, and so we can't necessarily. You're unmuted now. Okay. If another manufacturer is going to make it, they can't call it a Harmon Mute. They have to call it Wah Wah Bubble, or I think there are a couple other names. Ultimately, everybody calls it Harmon. That's what's written for in music,
right.
And
We all know what it is.
Other than legally, I don't understand a reason to not call it that. Right. Cool. Let's just jump right into it.
Yeah, let's try it. Let's see how well I can play in tune with this thing.
Yeah. Word of advice: don't play low. Don't play low.
Don't play low. All right, fine. Is that okay? Is that too?
I'd go a little bit louder if you could.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Is that all right?
Maybe slightly less.
All right. Nicely done.
I clicked the wrong